The diner was alive with the usual morning chatter, the clinking of coffee mugs, and the smell of bacon frying on the grill. At a corner booth, a man in his late 40s sat quietly with his young daughter, Sarah. He wasn't the type to draw attention. Worn out jeans, an old flannel shirt, hair neatly trimmed but starting to gray at the edges. His right hand gently rested on the table, the sleeve of his shirt rolled back just enough to show a faded tattoo that most people wouldn't recognize. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't colorful. Just a small, cryptic emblem, one that told a story only to those who understood it. Sarah giggled as she stirred sugar into her chocolate milk, her innocent joy softening the edges of the man who had seen more war than he ever wanted to remember. To her, he wasn't a soldier, a veteran, or a man who carried scars inside and out. To her, he was just, Dad. The door of the diner swung open with a sharp creak. A group of young men walked in, loud, cocky, and filled with the kind of arrogance that comes from never being tested. They wore expensive jackets and gold chains, the kind who lived to show off and pick on whoever looked weaker than them. One of them, broad-shouldered with a shaved head, noticed the quiet father and daughter at the booth. He smirked, nudged his friends, and swaggered over. "Hey, old man," the bully sneered, slapping the table hard enough to startle Sarah. "You're in our booth." The veteran looked up calmly, his deep brown eyes steady but soft. He didn't want trouble. Not here, not in front of his little girl. There's plenty of empty booths. We're not bothering anyone. The bully leaned closer, the stink of alcohol and cheap cologne filling the air. "You don't get it. I said move." Sarah's small hand gripped her father's arm. "Dad," she whispered nervously. He smiled at her gently, shaking his head. "It's okay, sweetheart." He turned back to the man, his voice calm. "We'll finish our breakfast. You go enjoy yours." That calmness only fueled the bully's rage. With a cruel laugh, he slapped the veteran across the face, the sound echoing through the diner like a gunshot. The room fell silent. Forks froze midair. Waitresses gasped. Sarah's eyes widened in horror, tears welling instantly. But the veteran didn't react the way the bully expected. He didn't shout. He didn't flinch. He simply sat there, slowly raising his hand to touch the spot where he'd been struck. And as his sleeve shifted further up, the tattoo on his forearm caught the light. The diner owner, an older Marine himself, saw it. His eyes went wide, his face drained of color. That mark wasn't just any tattoo. It was a symbol of one of the most elite units in U.S. military history, Delta Force. A symbol rarely seen, because the men who wore it rarely spoke of who they were. "Son," the diner owner muttered under his breath, "you have no idea what you just did." The bully laughed again, mistaking the silence for fear. He puffed up his chest, ready to push the veteran harder. But before he could, the veteran slowly stood up. He wasn't tall in a way that demanded attention, but when he rose to his full height, there was a shift in the air. Years of discipline, of battles survived, of leadership forged in fire, radiated off of him. His calm wasn't weakness, it was control. His silence wasn't submission, it was restraint. He stepped forward, his voice steady and quiet, but sharp enough to cut through the bully's arrogance. "You just laid your hand on a father in front of his child. That's something only cowards do." The bully scoffed, but his eyes darted to the tattoo again. Some part of him, deep down, knew he'd crossed a line he couldn't walk back from. His friends had fallen silent too, no longer smirking. The veteran leaned closer, his tone dropping to a whisper that only the bully could hear. "I've walked through fire to protect men who die for me. I've carried brothers off battlefields you couldn't even imagine. You think this is strength? Slapping a man who won't fight back." He shook his head, a bitter sadness in his eyes. "Strength is knowing you could destroy someone, and choosing not to." The bully swallowed hard, his bravado cracking. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. Then the veteran did something no one expected. He stepped back. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't retaliate. Instead, he took his daughter's hand and sat back down, as if the incident hadn't happened at all. That silence was heavier than any blow he could have delivered. The bully stood there, frozen, his power stripped away in front of everyone. People in the diner began to murmur. A man at the counter, a Vietnam vet, nodded slowly in respect. The diner owner crossed his arms and glared at the bully. "Get out," he said coldly. "Before you embarrass yourself any further." The group stumbled out, their false bravado shattered, leaving behind a room filled with quiet admiration. Sarah looked at her dad with wide eyes. Daddy, why didn't you fight back? The veteran smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Because, sweetheart, sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is walk away. The rest of the diner remained hushed, but every person there knew they had witnessed something far greater than a fight. They'd seen honor, discipline, true strength. And they knew, without him ever saying a word, that the quiet man in the corner booth had lived a life of sacrifice they could barely comprehend. As the scene fades, imagine being in that diner, witnessing the difference between arrogance and real strength. If you were moved by this story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because these stories aren't just entertainment, they're reminders of the values that matter most: courage, honor, and love for family. And as the veteran's hand gently held his daughter's once more, one truth lingered in the air long after the bullies were gone: legends don't need to prove who they are. Their presence speaks louder than any fight ever could.